G'day people, I'm Sharon, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you a slightly different method of Quilt As You Go. It's the method I used on this particular small quilt. And the difference is that whilst I am still butting two squares together and zigzagging over the join, I actually put this entire quilt together before I covered the joins. And when I did it, I had a whole piece of fabric over the back. So it's a little bit different. It does require you to have more of your quilt under the harp space of your machine, but it can do some really good things and add something to a quilt if the back doesn't look fantastic. I've found 6 squares, all of which were done a long time ago. I think they all look sort of like sashiko, so they should go together nicely. But one of them, this one, is cream on the back. All of the others are blue. So if I have one square with cream on the back, it's going to look a bit odd. But by putting a whole piece of fabric across the back, that should be sorted out. So we will start off by joining these with a 5mm wide, 2mm long zigzag. So here are my 6 squares joined together. There's the one with the cream on the back of it. And now I'm going to pin them to this, what we would in Australia call calico. I believe in the United States you call it muslin. And I'm just pinning it on. This is fairly easy because it's small. If it were an entire quilt that I was doing this with, I would actually do the spray basting, because when you start putting the covers over these joins, you really don't want things to be shifting. The first thing I am going to do though is stitch around the outside. I'm going to stitch 2 opposite sides and then the ends, but I could do it that way that I've just indicated. Long ones first, and in some ways that would make a lot of sense, but I'm actually going to do these ways first. And the reason is that our fabric, here is my selvage, which means this is the straight grain and it's the warp grain on the fabric, and it's very strong. If I try to stretch it in that direction, there's not very much stretch in the fabric, but there is a lot more stretch going across the fabric. And that means that if I do these 2 ends, I've actually got some play in this backing fabric when I'm going along here to stretch it out and make it long enough to fit. Now I've done a row of stitching down here and one down here. And when I turn it over, hopefully you can see that bit of stitching there and there. Now, I found when I turned it over to have a look that my backing fabric was a bit squished up in places. So I'm going to pin it again from the back, because that way I have a better idea of how things are sitting. And now I will stitch along this outer edge and this outer edge, and hopefully everything will be nice and flat. I've now stitched along the long edges. So on the back you can see 4 lines of stitching, and that really will help me when I'm putting the tape on here. I could choose to trim this off now, or I can wait until after I've done the putting the tape on top of here. It really doesn't make any difference. Now that I've got that piece of backing fabric completely attached, I'm going to put my tape on the front exactly the same way as I did in the last one on the front. So I've got my needle set to 8.0, which is 1 millimeter away from as far to the right as it can go, and I'm using the inside of this foot. That's where I want the fabric to be as I stitch it on. And see how nicely that stitch comes up as a big contrasty one. It's the sashiko effect that I'm after here. And rather than moving the needle across, I'm just going to turn it around because it's a small piece. So that's the piece across the middle. And now I'll do the same thing on here. Once again, I'm just going to turn it around because this is only a little piece. It's not going to matter very much. If it was a very big quilt, then I would be moving my needle because I wouldn't want to have multiple bits of the quilt on the right hand side, but this is so small it doesn't really matter. just big enough. Final row. Now that I've sewn the tape on the front, you can see the lines of stitching where I sewed it on. I'll remove the pins. And I would recommend, if you're doing a large quilt, you have things well pinned, basted, whatever. And there you can see the tape stitched on. It's come out very nicely. At this stage I can cut off the extra fabric around the outside and then just bind to the edges like I would any quilt. So now that I've finished this one, well, except for the binding, and you can actually see through there very slightly where that one was a different colour on the back, but it's not nearly so obvious as it was. Let's have a little look at this one. This design is 008, and it's one that I've already demonstrated. This one is design 59T, so it's trapuntoed, it's got the extra wadding in it, which is why it stands out better. So you'll notice around the edges, I have these sashing pieces. That's the feather sashing, and it comes in all the sizes, the same as all the other designs do. They're 3 centimetres, which is about 1.25 inches wide. And they can help to make something, maybe you're making a cover for a sewing machine and you just need it to be a little bit longer. Those bits can make it that little bit extra longer for you. There's also little corners here that match them. On the back, you can see the lines of stitching that are joining the tape on the front all the way through and getting the whole lot sandwiched together. There is of course backing fabric on each of these squares because that's how I usually do them. There are some other ways though. There are so many things I need to show you. Doing it this way, you have the choice. This fabric on the back could have been flannel, which would make things softer. And the other thing is, because there is no tape on the back, this is actually a little bit less dense around the areas where the tape is attached. So that's another thing to think about. See you next time.